Hello and welcome to J&B Talk F1 this week, Wednesday the 9th of September 2015, following the Italian Grand Prix over the weekend. My name is Jawad Yacoub and I'm joined on location by Baden Westerweller today. How are you?
Very well as ever. Great to be here again. Very excited with the commencement of the Enduro season for V8.
Oh yeah, that's something we'll get to a little bit later on, but first we're going to talk about F1 and of course the Italian Grand Prix, which has been won by Lewis Hamilton. We'll get into the tyre pressure scenario that stemmed from the Grand Prix, as well as an update on Renault's situation to buy back into Lotus, and also the engine situation with Red Bull, and is there a growing rift at McLaren? We'll also investigate that as well before getting into our preview of the Sandown 500. But 7th win of the season for Lewis Hamilton, although it was marred a little bit by the tyre pressure saga at the end. But imperious form we've seen from him once again.
Oh, for Rosberg, really, that late retirement, which we will elaborate on later on, really that's cruel use charge quite significantly. It's going to require an equal setback for Hamilton coming events, and that notwithstanding, Lewis just he's peerless at the moment. He's come out really fired up since that break he had when he did travel for a couple of weeks, and definitely enjoyed his time off. But he's come back and really he's taken it to a whole new level now.
Indeed, and Nico Rosberg retired on lap 51 of the race, lap 51 of 53, and he trails by 53 points now to his teammate, which is more than 2 race wins worth. And as you said, there's no chance for Rosberg unless Hamilton has similar retirements. So moving it on then, it was a popular podium actually with Sebastian Vettel and Felipe Massa, the former Ferrari driver, up there. Massa's still quite popular with the Italian crowd, the Tifosi, but it was a close affair between Felipe Massa and his Williams teammate Valtteri Bottas. I think he pipped him by just 0.3 of a second across the line, so good result for Williams, who have had a few poor races, as we've detailed greatly.
And again, for the Brazilian, that's not the first time this season that he's enjoyed the better of his much highly vaunted teammate, who now, Valtteri Bottas, it has been confirmed that he, alongside Massa, they'll be again forming the Williams lineup for next season.
Yeah, and it was interesting. At the end, Massa said, "Oh, I'm getting too old for this," and his team said, "Yo, you're not too old. You're not too old." So clearly, he's showing a lot of fight, which is great considering the barren patch he had whilst he was at his latter years at Ferrari, alongside Fernando Alonso. But speaking of Ferrari, Kimi Räikkönen, we detailed greatly on the Sunday podcast how he's starting on the front row and perhaps he could be in contention for a win. What ended up happening is he couldn't get his car away off the line. Something issue with the buttons or with the clutch or whatever it was, but he literally just didn't move when everyone else zoomed past him, and he ended up at the back of the grid when he got the car going, and he ended up recovering to finish 5th. So it's just a story of what could have been with Räikkönen, who seemingly threw away another good qualifying result in the race.
Yeah, it's becoming a fairly recurring theme this season, quite unfortunately. He does either on the Saturday or the Sunday get the job done, but he can't bring them together and really produce an all-around great weekend. Other than that sterling effort, which we keep mentioning at Bahrain, and there has been a lot of conjecture as well as to whose feet to apportion the blame for this latest setback. The stalling was saying whether it was the new start procedure which came into effect as of Belgium, or whether it was something to do with a new clutch for Kimi, or whether he was just simply just clumsy. And really, it's coupled with some of the earlier incidents he did experience, say Austria and the like, it is a bit of a query which he needs to address in this back half of the season.
Indeed, and another person who needs to address his starts, as we said before, Nico Rosberg, who did concede places on the start to both the Williams cars, and he was behind them for quite some time until the first phase of pit stops, where a strategy master stroke, he undercut both Williams cars and ended up ahead. So he was in the race to finish 2nd against Vettel. we discussed on Sunday how Ferrari had some good pace compared to the Mercedes, but when Lewis Hamilton took off, he just couldn't be caught by Vettel, and in the end, the gap was somewhere around 25 seconds. But moving it on, good points for Force India, both of them finishing ahead of the Red Bulls, who obviously started from the back of the grid, but both Danny Kvyat and Daniel Ricciardo finished in the points, so getting some points there as a recompense, but good race from both the Force Indias, who dropped a few places because of Raikkonen and Marcus Ericsson at the end charging, but still, it's good with their base-spec car to be getting up there and claiming points, especially with their battle with Red Bull in the Constructors' Championship. We just mentioned Ericsson. He finished in the points for the third consecutive race and ahead of his teammate again. His teammate Felipe Nasser ended up in some early trouble with both Lotus cars that retired on the first lap, and from there, Nasser's race was pretty much ruined.
Well, earlier in the season, there was a lot more hype around the Brazilian, of course, following that epic 5th place he enjoyed on his debut, and indeed Ericsson too was 8th, but there was a lot of really emphasis on the Brazilian that he was going to go on with it, and we've seen Sauber, of course, have barely had any upgrades throughout the season because of their financial situation, and yet since this Hungary time onwards, it's the Swede, Marcus Ericsson, who is indeed enjoying the better of that Sauber.
Yeah, and both drivers locked in for next year again, which is important to maintain continuity and also stability. But the Swedes' recent performances, you can feel that the momentum is sort of coming towards him. And Toro Rosso's as well, they started from the back of the grid with those acrimonious penalties. Max Verstappen probably the well-documented one, but both of them missed out on the points. But we did see Verstappen getting into the nitty-gritty again with Felipe Nasser, as he did in Belgium, and also with Jenson Button, which was quite something to see. Both of them racing wheel to wheel as well and forcing each other to the limit.
There was no quarter given by either, but they were racing right on that edge where they were respectful of each other's rights, and it's really good to see that still has a place amongst the youth of tomorrow and the possibly soon to be departing journeyman, elder statesman of today.
Indeed, and Button again, he was involved in he was going to get into a close battle with his teammate Fernando Alonso. Both were on separate, different strategies, and then towards the end, they were closing up on each other for P14. But another retirement for the Spaniard.
Yeah, it's 8 or 9 times now this season. It's probably throughout his last 6 or 7 seasons, he's now he's suffered in this campaign alone the setbacks, and one does have to wonder. Each weekend we come in and he puts on that brave front and says how, I've got to be happy with this and that, but could be getting to him, and get to the end of the season can't come quick enough for him, you'd say.
And two, there's been a lot of word and rumor going around over the weekend about a growing rift between the McLaren team, between Honda and their chief, with the McLaren guys and Eric Boullier and Jonathan Neal. We're going to talk a little bit about that later too, but good race for the Manners as well, keeping their heads out of trouble, and Will Stevens beating his teammate again, and yeah, just championship wise, Rosberg looking most definitely on the back foot now, and we said last week as well, I think, that Lewis already had one hand on the title. I think that second hand is getting close, isn't it?
Another replica of this outcome. Really, Rosberg needs to, if not winning, just ahead of Hamilton, gnawing away. It's going to be about 10 points a race now on average just to have a chance. It's really, from that early season point, he had that resurrection around Austria time, and we really thought that he had turned that corner. And of course, he's had these gremlins off the start now, a couple of races in consecutively, and who knows as well, he's got the newborn daughter there as well, whether this will weigh on his mind. But Hamilton just looks like he's in a zen state at the moment. It's going to take a lot going wrong for him to really not claim a second consecutive title.
Indeed, and moving it on now to something that attracted more attention than the race itself, it has to be said, and that was the tyre pressure investigation that was conducted after the race. Now, following the Belgian Grand Prix and the well-documented blowouts that occurred there of Sebastian Vettel and Nico Rosberg, Pirelli enforced strict regulations directive with the FIA for this race that the minimum tyre pressures must be 19.5 psi. And it was found by the FIA when they did their check, their random check or whatever, that Mercedes and Hamilton's tyres were 0.3 psi below the minimum, and Nico Rosberg was 1.1 below. Now, because he retired from the race, there wasn't much weighing on it, but with Hamilton having won, this was pretty significant.
Absolutely. The whole weekend, really, in the aftermath of Belgium, it was a hotly contested topic, and there was a bit of a compromise in the end in regards to these temperature limits. They did end up coming to a bit more of an agreement, which was a bit more lenient to allow a bit of variety for the teams there, but we've still seen Mercedes. They were very guarded indeed in those dying laps as well. Very hush-hush about the actual situation. We saw Bono on the radio pretty much telling Hamilton just to keep quiet and just cross the line.
We'll explain it later and stuff. So it seemed like that perhaps they were concerned, perhaps that the FIA would look into this. But in the end, what happened was the team was cleared. Hamilton got to keep his win, but the FIA concluded that the team's conduct regarding the tyres, it was correct and safe. But what the other conclusion was that they need to work with Pirelli to shed some more clarity as to when the tyre pressures will be checked. It was said that the time that Mercedes tyre pressures were checked before the race was after the tyre blankets were taken off, and just because of the conditions or whatever, the pressure drops a little bit, the temperature and what have you. So that was a variable that was taken into account. But a question to ask is, did they in a sense dodge a bullet, considering for the same reason Mitch Evans and Sergio Canamasis in GP2 on Saturday during qualifying were disqualified? So could it be fair to say that they dodged the bullet, even though I guess it wasn't entirely their fault for it, but consistency in terms of enforcing the regulation?
Well, it's something I think for Mercedes particularly. We did address on the pre-race preview on Sunday that they're in a position where they've been able to afford themselves these little risks they can take and really put things on the edge there if they so desired. And clearly they got away with it on this occasion. And luckily for the spectacle of the sport and the safety, nothing sinister did occur with these tyres, nothing like we saw with Rosberg and Vettel at Belgium. But who knows? It's not something you'd be wanting to chance next time out. Clearly, they've addressed it now quite thoroughly, and they cleared. And we move on to Singapore, where the tyres shouldn't be as much of an issue.
Well, now, if this is a mistake if this is the whole thing that happened over the weekend was a mistake simply made by the FIA, then what has to be said of that? On one hand, we've got drivers like Vettel coming out and exacerbating the fact that safety is paramount. And then on the other hand, you have the FIA who, I guess, negligent might be the best word to use in this regard, that they aren't really enforcing the regulation as it's supposed to be. Now they've gone and said that, we're going to shed more clarity on when we're going to check the tyre pressures or whatever. Shouldn't this have been done beforehand, not, leaving it to the next race?
And you'd especially think, in line with Jean Todd's remit about safety, this would have a very clear link to the road safety message he's been trying to spread almost as the most prevalent factor of his tenure. He's really been putting everything else to the side and focusing on that. And surely this would have had some kind of relationship there that would send a strong message, not just to the motorsport community, but to society as a whole, to do with cars, that it's something you need to get on the top of immediately. And it took a while for it to happen, but now it has, and thankfully nothing did transpire from it that was sinister.
But still, nothing did happen, but there shouldn't be any room for compromise. And this is something that I've put a link below in the description to an article I've written about Pirelli and being neglected by F1 as a whole, but there shouldn't be any compromises. And in the end, what happens is Pirelli's reputation that is on the line for making tyres that do this. And who else who else puts in the order to make those kind of tires? It's the sport. The FIA, the commercial rights holder, they're the ones who tell Pirelli to make the tire. And one thing we've also got to consider is Pirelli are on tender hooks at the moment with re-signing beyond 2017. Now their contract runs out next year, and we know Michelin's in the frame to come into the sport perhaps in 2017, but Pirelli, if they want to stay, they've laid down some conditions. And
tyre testing, they're pretty adamant that if
Yeah.
that's not going to be reinstated, then they've got no real future if they're going to continue to be pillory to post.
Well, that's a condition that they said it must be adhered to if they want to remain. If F1 wants to keep them in the sport, they have to introduce more testing, because whether you like it or not, you can cut costs. But in the end, safety is important. And if testing is going to ensure, better safety, then you can't put a price on that, can you? And that's not just to do with Formula One or racing, it's ethics. You can't put a price on safety.
Yeah, some things are non-negotiable. There's no price you can put on the well-being of not just the identity of a company which has a global reputation at stake, but the individuals and the associated families and everyone involved in that sphere. Really, they're the ones who suffer ultimately unless there is a decisive action taken up front.
Yeah, and in the end, it's sort of pleasing to see that Pirelli didn't take much flack over what happened over the weekend, but it just goes to show that they're the ones who stipulated the minimum tyre pressures, and they're the ones who said that this must be adhered to. But it just goes to show that no one's really taking them. Perhaps maybe the drivers, yes, after Vettel's outburst in Belgium, but it seems that no one else is really taking him seriously. And considering the tyres are such an important component of the sport, what are you going to race on without tyres?
Well, there's always a saying, what's the only contact point that comes into contact with the surface, and that is the rubber itself. And it seems to be just really treated as some kind of valueless commodity at times. It's there just to be bashed when there's an issue, and other times when they're the ones who are just an innocent bystander providing what they are as per the request. They can't win. It's a lose-lose situation.
Indeed, and hopefully the FIA does rectify their regulations regarding these tyre pressures and whatnot, and really start to take Pirelli seriously. Otherwise, of course they're not going to be around for much longer, but what kind of message does that send? That the FIA, the commercial rights holder Bernie Eccleston, the teams, they have no does it show that they have no regard for the well-being and also the the integrity of the tyres?
Oh, they just have them over a barrel, really. It seems to be whatever they say goes, and any resistance is just futile. But for Pirelli, now is the time to make a stand. If they have to get a little bit dirty in the process, so be it. But they've got a reputation at stake. Even if they do, as you say, withdraw from the sport at the end of 2016, they've got to be thinking longer term.
Indeed, but more on that in the article that is linked below, so please check that out. But we'll move it on now to updating the situation with Renault, Enstone, and also Red Bull and their future engine suppliers. And we've learned over the weekend that Red Bull have submitted a tender for the termination of their Renault contract, which is supposed to end at the end of 2016, but they want out now.
Yeah, well, it's not exactly the most surprising outcome. We'd heard whispers back during that summer break that some kind of a request would be made, put forward, and that did take place immediately following the Italian Grand Prix. And there was a lot of hype that Mercedes would be the ones who would come into to fill that void there, but it seems now that will not be the case.
Yeah, so Mercedes rejecting pretty much Red Bull's request to become engine supplier for next year and onwards. And I guess the main thing that was stipulated by the Silver Arrows was that performance-wise, we don't want anyone else beating the Works team. And Red Bull, certainly, they're really good with their chassis, and if they get a good engine under their belt, perhaps they could be back on top. So Mercedes certainly fear that. And we saw Dr. Dieter Zitzer at Monza over the weekend, and I guess his presence there was primarily for these discussions with Mercedes-Benz. And we did also, now with Mercedes-Benz out of the frame, we saw Christian Horner, Bernie Eccleston, and Maurizio Riverbene in discussion too. So it's natural that Ferrari are coming back into the frame.
We've got to remember as well, going way back when 2006, it was only for a solitary season, did the senior outfit Red Bull enjoy that Ferrari power before that was shuffled on to a Toro Rosso, and they were long-time customers of Ferrari, and they too, alongside Red Bull, are lining up to both be running with Ferrari power from next season. So it's a bit of a renewal of this relationship. It's not as though they're completely foreign, so this might count in their favour if they can get things really moving quicker than later and sync up the entire package there with the power unit.
Indeed, but going back a few months, I think I wrote about this and we discussed this on the discussed it on the podcast, and that was would this relationship really work? Now Ferrari are pretty. We know that they don't have the same principle when it comes to power units and equality. Would they want? Mercedes have already, shrugged them off. Would Ferrari give Red Bull an equal power unit to the works team? I mean, it's taken Ferrari, a year to get back on top of the regulations. And
well, the thing that you have to consider is Ferrari really, they're the last one standing unless Red Bull wants to go and beg to a Honda, considering how well they've been doing. Ferrari calling the shots here. They don't have to really be having the imprimatur there to provide them with an equal spec engine, at least not initially, until they do, ascertain just how competitive this RB12 and even the Toro Rosso have got to consider. They've been very much on the money this season. So really for Ferrari, as the last cab off the rank, as it is with Mercedes rejecting Milton Keynes, and really they're the ones who can lay out the terms and conditions.
Yeah, but would that be beneficial to Red Bull then? I mean, Red Bull are a team that prides itself on its championship glory and whatnot, and that's what I discussed in that article was, would Red Bull, attain the same success that they had with Renault in the V8 era, or are they going to be, sort of locked in this area where Williams at the moment are, where they knock on the door of a podium now every now and again, but can't actually sustain a full championship, mount?
Well, that's the question they have to ask themselves. Is this what we want? And really, whether it's a short-term solution and they go hunting for Audi, as we've discussed ad nauseum pretty much throughout this entire campaign, or whether they're quite happy to hook up with Ferrari long term and just go with it and hope that they will be given the equal treatment. It's something they've really got to address right now, because this situation with Renault, it's been festering for quite a long time, and they do need a solid lead time to make sure that all their efforts are back on doing what they did so productively throughout the late 2000s and up until 2013.
Indeed, and as you mentioned, lead time, something else that's worth pointing out as well, because the season doesn't officially kick off until much later next year, with April 3 being the date of the Australian Grand Prix, and winter testing for the European winter testing not commencing till March.
And there's only 2 tests that must be remembered as well. So
with the testing not commencing until March, I guess there's more lead time now for these teams. But still, if you're integrating a new engine, new power unit into your chassis, I guess you probably need more time for that. And we've learned that Adrian Newey is designing RB12, despite his claims that RB11 would be his last project. He's certainly sticking around and designing the new chassis for them. So it just remains to be seen what happens if they end up with Ferrari power, or if someone else will come and rescue them. But now for what's Mercedes going to do now they're not going to Red Bull? We've learned that Mana Marussia are in frame for Mercedes power next season.
Yeah, and a lot of hype as well around Pascal Wehrlein, the Mercedes reserve driver there. It's a logical tie-up if he were to assume one of those seats in that, what they would call as the junior Mercedes outfit. Considering Force India, there's been a bit of speculation there. They'll probably remain with Mercedes as well, but it's looking like they might retain the same combination there, and for next season get a real youthful driver in it at Mana with the backing of Mercedes, and we could really see them make that a long anticipated jump up the field, perhaps to a level where Haas, there's a lot of expectations surrounding them because of their tie-up with Ferrari.
Yeah, so it could be a real shot in the arm for Mana next season to have some more money injected into their team, and also get them an up-to-date chassis and also an up-to-date engine. So that'll be good to see. And yeah, Mercedes, the bigwigs at Stuttgart are really lobbying for this Wehrlein chap to have a seat next year. We said that perhaps Force India would be an option, considering he did some testing for them as well. But yeah, they're looking like they're going to retain both their drivers. Sergio Perez yet to be locked in, but the team are confident that they'll reach an agreement. So it'll be logical for Wehrlein to end up then at Manor if the Mercedes-Benz tie-up ends up happening. And just as you mentioned Haas as well, we've heard that Roman Grosjean perhaps is a contender there as well. And what does that say? Perhaps, he feels that the future at Enstone is looking uncertain because the Renault deal hasn't been done yet, and he's probably looking for a secure future elsewhere. Would you agree with this?
Well, the other factor he's really got to consider, it's quite lucrative, this tie-up that Haas are enjoying with Ferrari. It's pretty close to specification, so you can be assured if the initial Haas Challenger is anything like this year's Ferrari, he's going to have a very competitive package at his disposal. So perhaps it's just a simple leap of faith, and this has been coupled in more recent weeks with the entire up-in-the-air notion for Enstone and Vieri.
Indeed, and but then again, would it be right if he kept some faith in Renault? Perhaps by Singapore we might know what's happening there. Would he be right to...
Oh, I'd say if the Renault don't make a decision until the season finale, then he's well within his rights to move on. But you give him another 2 to 3 weeks by the end of September, perhaps.
Yeah, but also the window for Haas as well might be closing up, so you wouldn't want to miss out on that if the opportunity does present itself.
Yeah, well, either way, he deserves a spot on the grid, whether it ends up Enstone or the Haas operation coming onto the grid very soon. He's a man who's got a lot of talent. He just hasn't been able to fulfill it because he hasn't had the successful package at his disposal. So really, it'd be a shame to lose him. So as long as he can shore up his spot on the grid in whichever shape that is, then it's good on him.
Yeah, so moving it on now, and McLaren, as we discussed before, is there a growing rift inside the Woking operation and also their counterparts in Japan?
Surely not.
Surely not, and we've learnt over the weekend that perhaps Eric Boullier, Jonathan Neal, both the McLaren heads, and Yasuhisa Arai from Honda are not on speaking terms. This is a rumor that was circulated around, and
boo for cohesion.
And there was a there was a press conference that was held in sort of desperation to show that the team is still a united front. But one of the journalists quizzed Boullier and asked him, does he agree with Arai's claims of the surplus that Honda have over Renault? And Boullier sort of just said, "We are one." His response was, "We are one team," and gave a bit of a scoff. So perhaps things are not looking rosy between those two.
Yeah, well, it really just hasn't worked out in any shape or form this season. We looked way back. It was clear coming into even pre-season testing it was going to be a long road ahead, but everyone had high hopes that by this second portion of the season they will have made those quantum leaps forward, and if anything they've stagnated and gone backwards. And push comes to shove, then it doesn't matter how long you've been back in it for, the top brass want blood, and if it comes to pass that Arai-san is the one to go, then yeah, it won't be a surprise at all. And in terms of McLaren internal fighting there, then it's been 3 or 4 seasons now where they've been slipping back from the front, and something's got to give eventually.
Something's got to give indeed, and something we got to look at as well. That this year they could definitely, unless they get their act together by some miracle and end up scoring more points, it's looks likely they're going to finish pretty low down in the championship, and that'll mean that there's going to be a loss in revenue and also prize money, the television money as well that they get.
They don't have a title sponsor still. It's Honda who puts that bill now.
Yeah, no
title sponsor.
And no new sponsors may want to come on board to the team, and perhaps even current sponsors might end up ditching them.
We've already seen Boss have translated over to Brackley in recent times, to mention a few others.
Yeah, Hugo Boss have gone over to Brackley, and ever since Vodafone's departure, they haven't had a title sponsor on the car. And Ron Dennis has been bold in saying that a modern Formula One team doesn't really need a title sponsor. But you look at all the other teams on the grid, they've got, apart from Manor, I guess, but they've got, some pretty big sponsors on their team. And
look at Enstone, look at Peterweiss, so they're dependent, Enstone, on the continued just day-to-day operations, and that's all been tied up with Renault. But clearly it is imperative that you have that sponsor in place, because it's just not feasible in today's economy.
Indeed, and the more exposure it'll get them, despite how big the team is. I mean, sure, McLaren's synonymous with a lot of success in the past, but as you say, over the past few years, it really has gone below, and a lot of their revenue stream as well through Formula One seems to be stagnating. But one question that we got to ask is, is this really the one team that gets flouted in the press? Honda don't seem to want any external help with their engine program. They're strictly,
too proud
of their heritage and their culture to want, there's been so many calls for perhaps a power unit expert from elsewhere to come and assist them. But
we did have the same with Renault with Mario Rillian, and there were those reports as well that Renault refused to adopt the upgrade suggested by the Rillian, who was at the forefront of Mercedes' success with McLaren back in the late 90s and so on. So it's a bit of a recurring theme there. Clearly you see one operation that's really quite sure of themselves, when the reality is, from everyone else's eyes, that things are going anything but swimmingly.
So if, Arasan were to be removed from his position as the head of Honda Motorsport, would this precipitate, a change in their philosophy and principle? Perhaps, would we see, if they need external help, that it would come in?
You'd hope so. It's got to be a catalyst point now where something really quite decisive is done, and for Honda to be to give them more time, it's not realistic to think they're going to come in and be immediately a challenger. But coming way back when we saw the new regulations, 2013, when McLaren did announce that they would be renewing this partnership, then I don't know about you, but did they possibly come in too soon?
That's a question that has been touted by many. Perhaps, if they came in 2014 would have been too early. 2016 perhaps maybe a little too late, considering the change in regulation in 2017. Yeah. So 2015 was really the only option that they had. But as I've said in previous podcasts, give them time, and a lot of other people have said as well, give them time, they will come good eventually. But the time is running out, and as I said last week, sure, some leeway has to be given for them to have these struggles, but we're getting to the point now where, as you said before, that they seem to be going backwards rather than forwards. They're bringing new power units to each weekend, which in the regulations you can't do because of the penalties you incur, but they keep pouring in a lot of money, trial and error, and it seems to not be working out for them. Sure, if they had infinite testing miles, they could go to wherever they want in the world and test. They could perhaps get to the bottom of their problems, but the problem at the moment seems to be the integration between the two teams. It's not one team. It just seems like it's two teams at the moment. One team is the McLaren operation in Woking. Your second team is the Japanese contingent with Honda back in Chochigi. So,
well, it's much more complex than the notion of the chassis and the power unit simply not marrying together sufficiently. That it's pretty much a bit of a, you could say, colloquialism to describe the entire relationship. It's just this complete rift right down the center, and from either side, there doesn't seem to be that overt effort there to embrace each other, which is so important. You see with Ferrari throughout the years, their relationship, even with Bridgestone and with all the Shell, they're so cohesive the way they've worked. Now and Mercedes with Petronas and the like.
Shell and Ferrari announced over the weekend that they're extending their partnership too.
Very logical tie-up there, considering they're back in vogue this season.
There you go. So, yeah, if they want to go forward, surely they've got to give it a bit more time. But also, if need be, there must be change. Change must occur inside, whether it's at McLaren, whether it's at Honda. Doesn't matter. There should be no compromise. And if by removing Arasan, there's going to be, improvement in the development program, then by all means, it's a step they must take, because McLaren's philosophy, whether you look at it, when they've had their dark days, when they've had their success, they've always been about winning, and they want to be the team that is on top. And if they want to return to the top, then they must do whatever they can to get back there.
Well, I've got a feeling it's not far away at all now. The Japanese Grand Prix is going to be a hugely symbolic moment for both parties there. And if it comes to pass that they have another embarrassing weekend, that could be the real moment which sends proceedings over the edge, whether it's on McLaren's side, Honda's side, or both, that a real decision will be made for the future.
Indeed. So enough of F1, I guess, for now. We can never get enough of F1, but
we'll be back with F1 next week. But for now, there's more pressing matters.
What the heck, yeah. No nostalgia straight this week, because we decided to talk a little bit about V8 Supercars and also the Pirtek Enduro Cup, which kicks off this weekend with the Sandown 500, the 500-kilometer race at Sandown. And the season of endurance has started, and we are very excited.
Yeah, well, it's been a very interesting campaign. We have seen a changing of the guard, essentially. Ford back in the ascendancy this season. But, of course, endurance is such as the nature of the beast that it only takes one poor effort or one diamond in the rough, even if you get a good, double points, as you say, get a podium, and then your immediate challenges fail, then you're right back in the game.
Yeah, the championship hinges on what happens in the Enduros. After that, we'll realise who the contenders are and who isn't in there. So Sandown, we'll talk a bit of about that. It's a short but very tricky circuit.
It's technical, you can say.
A lot of people have been caught out by its tricky nature, and it's been dominated by the Jamie Whincup Paul Dumbrell pairing for the last 2 years. And with Whincup coming back on form at the Sydney event just prior to the Enduros, there's a chance that they could go for the three-peat.
Yeah, he's regained his mojo to a degree. He's obviously a long way down in the standings. It's been his stablemate Craig Lowndes who has really enjoyed the better of the running this season. But you can never dismiss Jamie Whincup. It's where his campaigns seem to come together. It's a recurring theme. Pretty much every time he's won the title, he's got the job done.
In the Enduros as well. Yeah. And Paul Dumbrell, probably the best co-driver you can have on the grid. He's as quick as, some people say. He's as quick as some of the main game drivers as well. That race he put in Sandown last season, that was just incredible. He was just fastest lap after fastest lap and really controlling the pace at the front. So Dumbrell doing a bit of Dunlop series as well to get some mileage under his belt, and he's really, he's really the guy that you want in your corner.
Craig Lowndes we did mention as well. Anyway, he's again with Stephen Richards there, and he's really on track now to again with Peter Brock. He's shared a very close relationship throughout his years. They're very synonymous with each other, of course. You can forget 2006 at Bathurst. Indeed, we should mention very quickly, yesterday, it is the anniversary. Was it yesterday?
Yeah, it was yesterday, the anniversary of his passing.
Peter Brock's passing, and of course he went on that year and took out the Bathurst to a much fanfare. But
most iconic victory for Craig Lowndes that day. But go on.
Yeah, we were saying, was it 9 pre-Bathurst victories, and it would be his 6th time at this fabled Sandown if he can win on Sunday.
Yeah, so Lowndes currently has 8 victories. The pre-Bathurst event, which has been at a number of different circuits, and Peter Brock holds the record at 9. So if Lowndes does win this weekend, he'll equal his good friend's record, and it'll also be his 6th win at the Sandown circuit as well, which is being dominated, as we said, by the Triple Eight organisation. But
on Lowndes quickly as well, he's got the news in the most recent days that he'll be it's been known for a while, Shane Van Gisbergen coming on board with Triple Eight, but Lowndes will be running a satellite-backed Caltex operation from next season, and he's got another 2 years on that contract there, and he's made no secrets that if he's still enjoying the success he's having now, then he could go on beyond that. So it's great to see this really the evergreen Craig Lowndes, who he hasn't won a title in 16 years, but he's just infectious, that smile, and keep him around until he's a geriatric for all we care. We love him.
Indeed. I mean, you see Russell Ingall coming back to do the Enduros in place of James Courtney, and he's, kicking on almost 50. Well, I think he's older than 50 years.
I'll be 52, 53 now. So really, age is no barrier. It's not like F1 or such where you get to 40 and past it. Or
Schumacher-like, But again, when we talk about form teams, and you said also Ford, the ProDrive Racing Australia team. They've been the form team all season, and probably the most potent duo to stem from that organisation is the guy who sits second in the championship at the moment, Chaz Mostert, teaming up with Cam Waters, who is tearing up the development series at the moment, leading the championship, and he's also knocking on the door for a full-time drive. So perhaps these two youngsters could be the guys to look out for in the Enduro Cup as a whole. We've seen how the FGX Ford Falcon has been pretty prolific across all different types of circuits, but the Enduros, as you said, are a different beast altogether, and you've got to factor in strategy. Sandown as well, a very narrow pit lane, and that's something that caught a lot of drivers out last year, most notably Alex Premer in the 33 Volvo car shared with Scott McLaughlin. He was doing quite well until, he was stuck in a traffic jam in the pit lane. So something we got to look out for.
Well, the ultimate remit of the Enduros really is consistency. You don't have to be top of the podium, but as long as you're up there constantly while your rivals are floundering, it can make all the difference. So for them, if they can really just stick the car on the track, and you've got two young drivers who are very much on the up and the up, it wouldn't be a surprise to see either of them when Waters makes his inevitable main game full-time debut from next season. They'll both be there for many years to come.
Indeed, we alluded to Russell Ingall, the evergreen Russell Ingall before, and
the enforcer.
Yeah, the enforcer, and he's going to be doing a bit of enforcing at Sandown because he's deputising for the injured James Courtney. Now, Courtney, we heard the other day, announced that perhaps return for Bathurst is looking a bit unlikely, with the news coming in that he has 5 fractured ribs instead of the initial 2 that was diagnosed.
Yeah, so, well, a bit of an article that was on the Speed Cafe site that really, if you want to avail yourself to that, he really describes quite intimately how he has been suffering for the last 3 or 4 weeks, and it's just made the most simple tasks a nightmare. And one has to wonder, with Bathurst really just around the corner, it's going to be a huge ask to get himself up in whichever adequate shape that might be. He's got to be close to full fitness to give that one a full tilt.
Indeed, and it's been a bit of a hard couple of knocks for Courtney at Bathurst over the past few years. We saw when he was paired up with Greg Murphy how, for one reason or another, they'd be involved in an incident. And
both years into the wall.
Both years into the wall. For, I think, the first year, 2013, it was at the top of the mountain, close to Skyline. He hit the, just going over McPhillamy, he hit the wall and Murphy out, and then same thing last year. And if Courtney misses this one, that'll be a huge shame, because 3 Bathursts in a row he's been sort of wiped out of contention.
Not that we would begrudge Russell Ingall getting possibly his final crack at in the meantime, at Bathurst, possibly with a half competitive car. Who knows what he's capable of? And of course, renewing that iconic partnership with Perkins.
Jack Perkins, son of Larry, of course. And this is something that Ingall was quite excited about. The first time he's driving a HRT in all his years in V8 Supercars, which has been probably 100 years or whatever.
He's been around. He's passed all prehistoric times. It's a bit like our friend Paul Morris, as we like to know him affectionately, the Warthog.
The Warthog. Yeah, so this is the first time that he will be driving a HRT Commodore. So he's very excited, and we wish them all the best, then the Perkins-Ingall duo. But some other pairings we've got to look out for, I guess, the number 17, the Dick Johnson Team Penske, DJR Team Penske car driven by Scott Pye and Marcus Ambrose.
Oh, that guy. Who's Marcus Ambrose again? Can you remind us?
I don't know. He won 2 championships in 2005 and 2004, I think, and went off to America. And then he said he was going to do V8s again this year, but I don't know what happened. He sort of just
got lost somewhere between Albert Park and Simmons Plains. It will never resurface. Yeah. He's apparently going to be back here this weekend, and that, which is good to see. He's still kicking.
Good to see, yeah, and the car is a lot better than when Ambrose initially drove it at Clipsal and Albert Park. Scott Pye doing a lot of the work from the ground up, so watch them, and certainly at Bathurst as well, they could be potent. Number 33, as we mentioned before, Scott McLaughlin pairing up with Frenchie, Alex Premer again, and despite their hardships this season with reliability, if they get things right for the Enduros, they could be a real force to be reckoned with. And considering they're not really in the championship hunt either, they could just be going for all or nothing.
Yeah, throw the kitchen sink at it. Clearly, we've seen bucket loads of talent from from Scotty, who likes to jandle it, as he says, when he's on the money. And at Prema, he did come into his own a bit more in that second campaign he had before he was relegated to this enduro driver.
Yeah.
So clearly they've got a bit of pedigree here to come out and pull something out of the hat.
But also last season he didn't do any racing at all. So coming out at Sandown, he was quick out of the box, and that's a positive thing for the Gary Rogers Motorsport crew.
Would it be just worth mentioning quickly, any chance Prema could come back to Australia? Do you reckon he could be tempted by this second seat?
Probably. He doesn't seem, there hasn't been any word regarding it, so perhaps we'll see anyway. But yeah, moving it on, car number 55, David Reynolds in the Green Machine with Dean Canto, a pretty reliable pairing, as they have been over the last couple of years. They finished second at Bathurst in 2012. They were so close to winning that race against Jamie Whincup on the final lap. And then who can forget the Dave's maiden victory for the Botolo team, and also in V8 Supercars at the Gold Coast, and the podium moment where he threw a threw a flower pot down, and also
say hi to Levi and Chili for me, amongst other memorable
that
moments
was
by
Sandown.
Mr. Reynolds. He's quite laconic.
Yeah, so Sandown last year, I think he said that. So, and considering how high up in the championship David is, he's sitting fourth at the moment. So a lot hinges on the Enduros for this pairing, and because they're really good with each other, they're so reliable, perhaps we might see them up there.
And he's got his contract up for renewal, so we want him to be on his best game there to really shore up whatever it is, whether he stays at the FPR fold or he does move on to this techno entry, or even
Brad
DJR
Jones,
Penske.
DJR or Brad Jones Racing as well. Car number 97, the Styx Darrell Lee entry, Techno Autosports, Shane Van Gisbergen.
One of your favourites, isn't it, the Styx?
Oh, just probably because of the sweets. I tell you what, we'll be trackside at Sandown, by the way, this weekend, and there's no doubt we're going to be harvesting the free samples given by the Styx team of the Styx confectionery.
Might have to come up with a few different identities, otherwise they'll ban us.
Indeed, but yeah. Van Gisbergen not having a really good season so far in his final campaign for the Techno team, but come enduro time, if they really get the setup nailed, he and Jonathan Webb can be a potent pairing, and we saw them win at the Gold Coast last year on the Saturday, and also they were in contention for that Bathurst win before it was
stalling, was he, in pit lane?
Yeah, in the pit lane he stalled and it was just taken away from him. So look out for those two as well.
Yeah, we want to sign off on he's had a good tenure at the Techno operation for 3 years, and really hit the big switch to the full backing of Triple Eight.
Yeah,
he's on a high.
And also the final pairing to look out for, car number 222, Nick Percat and the international megastar and Oliver Gavin, Le Mans winner this year in the GTE Pro class. And although Percat's had a switch of team from last year when they but they finished on the podium at Bathurst. Third on the podium at Bathurst. Gavin has been re-signed with Percat for this season, and those two really, really quick, as we saw last season. But it just depends on the car speed. If the car's set up well and they get the speed out of it, the Lucas Dumbrell Commodore.
Well, they have got backing from Triple Eight. I don't know the ones who supply the chassis to them, so they've got some hope there. If they've been
but getting the setup, get the setup right, and they can be up there too. So finally, before we sign off today, a prediction for Sandown, perhaps, who's going to be up there?
Love to say CL, but whether it happens or not, it's going to be hard to go past the Ford triumvirate there. But I'll put it out there. I'm going to say Lowndesy will get the job done with Richards, and we'll see at least one, or if not two, of the other Fords making up that podium.
Indeed, not looking past Whincup, I guess, to make it a hat trick.
I reckon he'll be strong, but third or fourth perhaps. Bathurst will be where he really comes into his own, but Lowndesy really does seem to have quite a stranglehold on at least this pre-Bathurst event.
I guess for me, probably just because of how the form that Chaz Mostert's had leading up until the Enduro events, they'll be an exciting pair to watch, and perhaps you'll get the job done with Cam Waters. So I'm putting my favoritism over to the number 6 car. And another article that I've written is more in detail about the Enduro pairings, my top 5 pairings. So that's in the description. So please check that out, along with the Pirelli article. So from me, Jawad, Baden, thank you for joining us. We can't wait to get trackside this weekend for Sandown. It'll be incredible. And we'll see you guys next week.
Ciao.